South Sudan's government and opposition failed to come to an agreement as deadline for an agreed negotiating window approaches. The challenges of securing the Sahel region and what the visiting German Chancellor is offering in support. And we examine the options for South African Caster Semenya after losing appeal against new athletics rules. This is Africa Live. A very warm welcome. I am Peninah Karibe, and in studio with me is Rama with a sneak peek of what's ahead in business news.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Widows of hanged Nigerian activists will continue their case against Shell in the Netherlands. And Kenya aims to lower its fiscal deficit to 5.6% of GDP in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. But is that a feasible target? We'll find out. In the meantime, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. And we begin tonight in Ethiopia, which has been hosting the latest round of South Sudan peace talks. The formation of a new government of national unity in that country remains in limbo after the current government and opposition failed to come to an agreement. They have just 10 days left of negotiating time, but the opposition is already calling for 6 more months of talks. Coletta Wanjohi tells us more.
For 8 months, South Sudan's two main warring factions have tried to seal a deal that would create a new government. But with less than a fortnight to go, the opposition says it needs 6 more months.
The security arrangement must be completed before the formation of the Artigono. And that's the agreement said, Article 2.2.1. And also the number of states, because we must go into that government not to negotiate again, but to implement the agreement as it came.
But the government says it has no reservations.
What do you mean by the government ready? If the government was not ready, then we would have not come here.
One oversight group says there are 15 major tasks that are still pending in order to achieve a total ceasefire.
Refraining from acts of sexual and gender-based violence by the parties. B. Cantonment, disarmament, screening, demobilization, selection, unification and training of forces. C. Demilitarization of civilian centers.
Other challenges include a delay in the establishment of some institutions, financial constraints and lack of coordination. The push and pull between the government of South Sudan and its opposition opens up a lot of uncertainty about the return of total peace to South Sudan. But the United Nations is warning the warring factions that there is no other option apart from peace. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And Coletta is live for us from Addis Ababa for more on this story. Coletta, what's the latest from those discussions about forming a unity government in South Sudan?
Well, Peninah, it has been the first day of discussions, and this will last for 2 days, today and tomorrow. But today, the main agenda was about the two warring factions, that is the opposition and the government, looking at the issues that both of them are skeptical about. In essence, it's just about security arrangements. Both sides are not really, do not really trust each other, because the opposition says that it needs more time to actually bring back its soldiers from wherever they are. But the Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Committee has noted that there is not a single barracks that has been formed as per the agreement of the pre-transitional government, and that gives a problem, because if the security has not been put into one place, then that means there is a problem. So disarmament is an issue, and there is no trust, especially in terms of security. So what we are having now is just meetings, and hopefully IGAD is hoping that the two factions will come to an agreement, a compromise agreement.
And Coletta, how is the African Union helping to achieve lasting peace in South Sudan?
Well, Peninah, the African Union works through regional blocs, and in this case, it is the Intergovernmental Authority for Development, IGAD, that has been brokering the peace talks since 2013, when the conflict began. So the African Union is working through the IGAD, and the IGAD has formed mechanisms, the Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Mechanism. We also have a committee that has both government and opposition parties monitoring all this, and from time to time, it has also a special envoy, which is who is Mr. Wise, that keeps doing shuttle diplomacy diplomacy between the opposition and the government. So the AU has entrusted this onto the regional body, and the regional body in turn reports to the African Union. So the African Union is very much in South Sudan in all the processes through the IGAD.
Okay, Coletta, thank you for that update. Coletta Wanjohi, live in Addis Ababa. Let's head to Somalia now, and the United Nations is warning that drought conditions in the country could trigger a dire humanitarian crisis. The UN has now launched an appeal for $1.6 billion to address the situation.
It's being feared that without urgent action, drought conditions in Somalia could trigger a major humanitarian crisis. A fourth consecutive year of below-average rainy seasons has left around 6.2 million people in need of emergency aid. The UN has launched an appeal for $1.6 billion to address the crisis.
A major challenge right now is the underfunding of the 2019 Humanitarian Response Plan. Currently in May, only funded to 19% for the year, which is very worrying with the current extent of the humanitarian crisis that's evolving as we see it now.
Nurta Abdi Osman was displaced by drought conditions. She came to the Halwadag camp seeking refuge, but continued to face challenges.
Since coming here, our challenges multiplied. There is an extreme shortage of water. There was no education for our children when we came, but now there is Hauladag Primary School, providing the much-needed learning opportunities for our kids. The needs of the IDPs in this camp are huge, and we need assistance from the international community.
UN officials, along with Norway's senior advisor on humanitarian affairs, visited IDP camps such as Halwadag to assess their needs. The delegation also held a meeting with the president of the Southwest State, Abdi Aziz Hassan Mohammed, to discuss how to address the growing crisis. Astatal, CGTN.
Caster Semenya has been unsuccessful in her attempt to prevent implementation of new regulations that force female athletes with disorders of sexual development who compete in the 400 meters to 1 mile events to reduce their testosterone levels. The Court of Arbitration for Sports ruling has come as a massive blow to Semenya's ongoing fight with the IAAF. CGTN CS Duplessis has more from Johannesburg.
The decision has caught many by surprise and drawn widespread criticism from all over the world. And despite CAS admitting the new regulations were discriminatory, according to many athletics scribes, it appears as if the basis for the panel's verdict was not entirely based on the IAAF's research.
By its very nature, I think sport will discriminate against someone or a certain group. I guess their issue is, do we discriminate against the majority of women, or do we discriminate against a tiny minority? And I guess that was probably the crux of the whole case, was, yes, the reality is someone's not going to be happy with this.
The 28-year-old must now take medication to reduce her testosterone levels by half if she wishes to continue running her marquee events, the 800 meters and 1500 meters. Should Semenya choose to, the side effects could well hamper her performance and prevent her from emulating the performances that saw her claim the world and Olympic title.
It depends on how much she needs to get it lower. So she might feel awfully bloated, and for an athlete to feel bloated, she might feel lethargic and tired. She can also not afford that. And just from the side effect of the medicine, apart from this massive reduction in her testosterone that will naturally make her feel much less driven and energetic.
Speculation continues to do the rounds as to what the world and double Olympic champion can achieve in the longer distances not affected by the controversial new regulations that take effect on May the 8th.
As a middle distance also, you will need a good endurance, you will need a good speed. I think she's doing it just perfect. I don't think she will go for the 5,000 in future, but as you say, she looked very, very good. If I'm given opportunity to advise, I say, hey, go for 5,000 also.
Semenya has now explored the 5,000 meters and proved to be successful at the new distance. But now the naturally gifted athlete may have to accept her fate and make a difficult call on her athletics career, or make a stand for what she and other athletes affected by the regulations believe in.
Knowing Caster, she's a defiant individual. I do believe the fight wasn't just about her. she's always been the kind of fighter that goes, okay, she's like the David and IWF was the Goliath. So whatever form it may take, she will be fighting for something.
Caster Semenya appears to be preparing for a fight. Along with the backing from Athletics South Africa and the South African government, she looks set to take on the Court of Arbitration for Sport's decision. Her decade-long fight with the IAAF appears to have no end, as she aims to do what she believes is her right, and that's run the way she was born. CS du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Reactions to Caster Semenya's fight against the IAAF's decision to restrict testosterone levels in female athletes continues, while some responded with dissatisfaction after the Court of Arbitration for Sport dismissed an appeal by Olympic 800 meters champion on Wednesday. Others believe the athletics world governing body came down on the side of fairness.
I was disappointed in it for a few reasons. Obviously, I was involved in the Semenya defense case at CAS, testifying as a sort of independent consultant witness. So we put together what we thought was a case that argued quite well that the scientific evidence on which the case rests, the policy rests, was flawed. And I come at this obviously as a physiologist and as a scientist. So for me, that argument was very strong, and I felt would be sufficient to overturn it.
Yeah, I think it was always going to be a very difficult situation because, through no fault of her own, she just happens to have this condition. But at the end of the day, the IAAF has to make a decision on, the line that's drawn between the female races and the men races in the categories. And while it's no fault of Caster Semenya's, unfortunately, for her, she will now actually she'll have to make a decision to either start taking the medication to reduce her testosterone levels or not be allowed to compete. And that's a difficult situation to be in, but I think the decision was based on the fairness of sport so that there is a level playing field for all of the athletes in any given race.
All right, let's get you more reactions. We're joined live from Johannesburg by CGTN CS du Plessis. So CS, people have been reacting to the Semenya verdict. How has this development been received there in South Africa?
Well, it has to be said that the whole decision, when it came out on Wednesday, there was surprise across South Africa and I think across the world. In general, South Africans have reacted with outrage. I know that the ANC has come out and said they're appalled by the decision by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. They're not happy at all. Social media has been abuzz with people contributing sympathy for Caster Semenya. So from all corners of South Africa, the continent, and I think the globe, there have been mixed emotions with regards to this, because I think people can gauge that ethically it's a human rights sort of violation to a certain extent, and there's serious holes in the research the IAAF have done. But from another point of view, there is arguments why the IAAF wanted to level the playing fields, and the other side, Caster's been born, it's a natural occurrence in her body, so why should she be targeted? So I'd have to say there's outrage. There's a lot of people who feel that Caster needs to fight on. If she does that, well, we'll have to wait and see.
All right, so CS, why do the new rules apply only to women in track events from 400 meters up to a mile?
It's an interesting one. I think it goes back further than just a couple of years. I think if you touch on Dudi Chan's CAS hearing in 2015, the IAAF thought they had the research to prove that there was an unfair advantage for DSD athletes in the various events from 400 to 1 mile. And I think that initially the IAAF wanted to blanket all female events in athletics and say, well, if your testosterone levels were higher than a certain level, sorry, you couldn't compete, you had to take medication. But it turns out that their research is only really applied to the 400 to the mile events, and that's what they've based their whole case on when taking on athletes with DSD. So for
For now, those regulations take place from the 8th of May, and athletes with DST, female athletes with the DST, will be required to voluntarily do a blood test to prove that their testosterone levels are below the required amount. So it's a very curious case as to how the IAAF intends rolling this out, monitoring it, and not setting another precedent for other athletes to potentially come and raise their testosterone levels. So it's a very grey area at this point.
And questions are being raised about what options Caster Semenya has after Wednesday's ruling. Sias, what lies ahead for the athlete?
It's a very unknown sort of future for Caster Semenya, and I think she set the world abuzz today by tweeting about walking away with dignity on social media. She's been quite vocal with her tweets, posting some cryptic messages. So who knows? For now, we know she's in Doha. She's going to compete in the 800 meters in the Diamond League. That's tomorrow night. Many people are speculating that this could well be her last race ever. At this point, will she have a crack at the world record that stood since 1983 in the 800 meters? She's only a second off. She might be going to make a huge statement. We don't really know, but at this stage, she's tested the waters at 5,000 meters. She proved at the national championships that she's capable of running that event quite comfortably, although it wasn't an earth-shattering time, her 16:05 in that 5,000 meters. She definitely put Dominique Scott in her place, and Dominique Scott is an accomplished Olympian, so who knows what Caster can do. But at this stage, it looks though, through that cryptic message, if we can speculate a little bit, she won't be taking the medication. She'll either call it a day after tomorrow's race, which will be very sad indeed, or she'll look to take on the 5,000 meters and aim to qualify for the September event when they go back to Doha for the World Championships.
Tough decisions indeed for Caster. Yes, thank you very much for that update, Caster. CS Duplessis, live for us in Johannesburg. And you're watching Africa Live. We're taking a short break. We'll be right back.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Data out of the country. The country's a foreign currency reserve.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel is on a 3-day tour of West Africa. The German Chancellor has met with about 850 German soldiers stationed in Mali as part of a United Nations peacekeeping mission. Western governments, including former colonial power France, have been trying to help curb the rise of jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL operating in the Sahel region.
Jamila Amadou is one of the many thousands who fled Gao in 2012 when extremist groups occupied the northern city of Mali. She's now back after many years, using her skills as a nurse to help the city to heal despite ongoing security in the region.
We care for patients. People come with all kinds of issues: malaria, diarrhea, typhoid, fever. We see a lot of children, even more than adults.
Apart from the hospital visits, Jamila has turned her home into a rescue center for girls. UNHCR, several NGOs and partner organizations are also working to rehabilitate the main local hospital and where Jamila works to provide more support.
The hospital was looted in April 2012. Everything was stolen. Reconstruction is taking place. It is not completely over yet, but comparing to 2012-2013, it is much better.
According to Jamila, the main city in northern Mali is slowly making progress. Its population has grown, reaching some 60,000 people. With a strong international security presence of around 30,000 troops, Gao has also attracted those looking for greater security in the region. Chombono, CGTN.
CGTN's Deji Badmas has been following the developments from Lagos. He says the money pledged by Germany is much needed for ramping security in the region.
Well, quite significant. Significant in the sense that we're now seeing Germany making a renewed pledge. That $60 million pledge is actually something massive. It's something that the G5 Sahel force actually needs, because what has been the problem with the G5 Sahel force is that funding has been a challenge. So it's good that we're seeing Germany pledge $60 million. But, you know, we just hope that the German leader now would follow up, you know, by redeeming that pledge, because we saw some countries pledging some $2.3 billion late last year, but those monies have actually not come in. So this is quite significant. But beyond the issue of insecurity, it's also important that development issues are discussed, and it's good that that actually you know, came up during the discussion, and we believe that in the course of her meeting, I'm talking about Angela Merkel's meeting now with other leaders of the region, that issue would definitely come up, because tied to the issue of insecurity in that region is of course development. Development is needed. You need governance, and all these issues would need to be addressed to be able to resolve the insecurity challenge in the region. We're talking about a region where about 75% of the population is youth, and the economy there, the GDP is very low. It's, I mean, that region is among the poorest in the world, and economic development is very, very important. Most of the young people in that region do not have jobs. Jobs are difficult to come by. Economic opportunity is not there, and that is what is responsible for this huge wave of irregular migration you see in that region. And it's also what is driving some of these young people to join some of this militant sect operating in the region, because a large part of that region is not governed. The governments of those countries are very poor. They are not able to govern every part of that region. And where you have the absence of government, in anywhere you have the absence of government, that's an opportunity for militants now to come in and provide some kind of alternative. So these issues are very important. The development issues very important. It is actually what it's feeding into the insecurity issue in the region. And the hope is that this visit would be able to concentrate on those two key issues.
Meanwhile, Angela Merkel earlier pledged support to Burkina Faso as the West African country works at countering security threats facing it. She said this after holding talks with President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore. Merkel had earlier arrived in Burkinabe as she kicked off her tour of West Africa. Meanwhile, Britain is considering stepping up its military support to Nigeria to help the country defeat Boko Haram terrorists. It follows a rise in terrorist activities in the country's northeast in the past year. The UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt said this after making a visit to the city of Maiduguri. Hunt warned that if not tamed, activities of Boko Haram in Nigeria's northeast may cause a humanitarian catastrophe at a scale that was witnessed in Yemen. Britain currently provides more than $300 million in aid to Nigeria. Now, still in Nigeria, a radio station host is defying high odds to battle Boko Haram's extremist ideology with programming in the local Kanuri and Hausa languages. Dandal Kura radio station seeks to inform communities around the Lake Chad Basin in spite of possible dire consequences.
Every morning, Fatima comes to Dandal Kura radio station in Maiduguri, located in northern Nigeria. She isn't playing the latest hits. Instead, she gives her listeners across the Lake Chad Basin information about human rights and land laws. She also talks about the Boko Haram insurgency, denouncing the group's radical Islamic views.
I have a passion for it, because the radio, most especially the Dandal Kura radio, is a radio which is based for the voice of the Lake Chad Basin, most especially those people that are affected by the insurgency. And Dandal Kura is to broadcast in two voice, Kanuri and Hausa language.
With an estimated 10 million listeners, Fatima and Dandal Kura radio station have a wide-reaching audience. Among them are extremists who have sent the radio station tapes decrying their operations and even threatening to behead the women who work there. For this reason, many stations in the area avoid talking about the insurgency.
Quite sure we have a large number of media outlets in this region and these states alone, but they don't want to talk about the insurgency or terrorism because of their self-security.
Some listeners appreciate the station's efforts.
Dandal Kura Radio is running a program on peace building, and they enlighten people, especially about the insurgency. They talk about how they should surrender and embrace peace.
Despite the threats from militants, Fatima remains determined.
It is not necessary that until the police or the soldier come and stay wherever you are, that means that you are secured. No. Even a person as a human being, there is some ethics that you also be guided so that you feel that you are secured.
Northern Nigeria has been heavily affected by the Boko Haram insurgency, which began in 2009. Fatima and Dandal Kura hope to fight such extremist ideologies by using the airwaves. Astatal, CGTN.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has told a UK court that he does not want to be extradited to the United States. He defended himself as a journalist whose work has protected many people. Supporters gathered outside the court demanding his release. The US has requested to extradite him for allegedly conspiring to hack a Pentagon computer. The 47-year-old Australian citizen was arrested last month after his 7-year asylum in London's Ecuadorian embassy was revoked. He was sentenced Wednesday to 50 weeks in prison for escaping bail in 2012. According to his lawyer, Assange will fight extradition, but it will be a long battle.
Today's hearing was a basic procedural hearing, just to set down a timetable for what's next. We are still waiting for the full extradition request from the United States. We have a provisional request from the embassy, but not a full request. So the next hearing, once we get that, we'll be able to consider more the substance of the case and what to do next.
For the last weeks since he was arrested, he has spent
23 out of 24 hours a day in his cell, most of the time. That is what we call in general terms solitary confinement. That's unacceptable. And that applies to most of the prisoners in that appalling facility. It is unacceptable that a publisher is spending time in that prison.
All right, let's now go to Rama for the day's business news.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in business. Widows of Nigerian activists who were hanged in 1995 will continue the case against Shell in the Netherlands. And Kenya set to lower its fiscal deficit to 5.6% in the 2019-2020 fiscal year.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. See, business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. A court in the Netherlands has ruled that it does have jurisdiction to hear a damages suit that's been brought against the oil major Royal Dutch Shell. That case has been brought by 4 widows of activists who were executed by the Nigerian government in 1995. In a preliminary ruling, the judges at the Hague District Court said they would allow the suit to go forward, but they cautioned that they did not agree with the assertions by the widows that Shell should have and could have done more to prevent their husbands' deaths. The men were executed and they were among a group that became known as the Ogoni 9. The 9-member group had protested against Shell's exploitation of oil and gas resources in the Niger Delta.
And I'm glad I've seen the step. The court said they have jurisdiction over it. So we'll continue from there. I'll keep on fighting. I want my husband to be exonerated. He was killed like an animal. He was killed like just a criminal. And he wasn't one. He was not a criminal.
The tragic event that occurred in 1995 shocked us all, and what we did at Shell then with other individuals and organizations was to actually appeal to the military government in Nigeria for clemency. Unfortunately, that appeal was not heard.
On to East Africa now. The Kenyan government aims to cut its fiscal deficit in the 2019-2020 fiscal year to just 5.6% of GDP. That's from an estimated deficit of 6.1% in this fiscal year. The East African nation is bound to borrow about $3.2 billion from foreign markets in that fiscal year, 2019-2020, and another $2.9 billion in the domestic market. The state's rising levels of public debt, well north of $54 billion now, has been a case of bitter discussion in most macroeconomic assessments. Although Kenya's GDP at market prices has been growing year on year, there are experts who are against using it as an indicator, a barometer, if you will, to measure the real health of Kenya's economy. The same applies to GDP growth, which analysts argue doesn't really portray the real picture of Kenya's living conditions. Over in West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire is expected to export some 875,000 bales of cotton in the 2019-2020 season. That's according to a new report by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, the new record is the result of improved yields. Overall, production for 2019-2020 is forecast at 925,000 bales. Almost all of the cotton that Cote d'Ivoire produces is exported for processing elsewhere. The report did reveal, however, that the West African country's textile industry does struggle to compete globally, and that's a challenge that's expected to persist. At the moment, Bangladesh is a top importer of cotton from Cote d'Ivoire. In the meantime, in Rwanda, the cosmetics industry there is growing, so much so that one young citizen has decided to take a leap of faith and set up a cosmetics line that describes itself as being purely organic. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with more.
Safas Nshimyu Muremi started with just $10 when he launched a new natural cosmetics line called Uburanga, or beauty in English. It's grown into a business worth $40,000. The young Rwandese has always had big dreams, but as a science teacher in rural Rwanda, he was struggling to make ends meet. With just $10 in his pocket, he decided to use his knowledge to open a business.
We make sure that the product which we are producing is for Africa especially, and they are natural. The other product they have chemicals, some chemicals, and these chemicals can destroy, for example, the skin.
Many of the plants, including aloe vera, are grown in Nshimyu Muremi's own garden. They're dried, crushed, and mixed with oil and water to make soap, antibacterial gels, and shampoos. With one bar of soap selling for 50 cents and a bottle of lotion at $1, the beauty range is an affordable alternative.
I started using Uburanga products because I suffered from terrible acne and it used to make me feel uncomfortable. In 2012, Cephas gave me a soap to use as a trial and everybody used to laugh because the soap was black and had a strange shape, but it cleared the spots on my face. After that, I started using the lotion from his range of products, which I also used on my daughter who had white patches on her scalp. I used the Uburanga castor oil to treat the white patches.
Since starting in 2012, Uburanga has grown into a business with 20 employees and around 5,000 distributors across Rwanda. The company exports its products to the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Let's head away from the continent. The World Horticultural Expo has been held in the capital of China's Yunnan province, Kunming, since 1999. The region is home to China's flower industry. It accounts for the majority of its cut flower output. As you're about to see, Yunnan's total revenue over the last 20 years has recorded a growth of more than 100-fold.
Guan Chao is a flower retailer. He started selling flowers that he planted himself at a Donan flower market in 1998. At that time, the market was small, and so was his booth.
My booth was only 2 square meters, and flowers were put into 2 or 3 barrels, or were simply piled on the ground.
The World Horticultural Expo in 1999 was a huge opportunity for the Donan market. The county it was in was a sub-venue of the event. Flowers from both home and abroad were brought here. The expo was an eye-opener for Guan and also brought fame to Kunming. An international flower auction and trading center was opened at a Donan market in 2002. Guan's business grew by leaps and bounds.
At least 100,000 flowers are auctioned at the auction market here. I hadn't imagined that my business can develop to such a scale.
The total planting area has grown 65 times in the past 2 decades. The industry creates 52.6 billion yuan in revenue annually, and that's 111 times larger nominally than 20 years ago. Donan has become Asia's largest flower market, with 1,000 tons of flowers transported to all over China daily and 50+ other countries and regions. Song Yaotian, CGTN.
Right then, flowers aren't just flowers. We're still, of course, in the floral industry, but given all the plant varieties you have in the world, many companies are cashing in on the special types of flowers they do grow by collecting patent fees.
It is a tulip heaven in Lees, a small town in South Holland of the Netherlands, and a local company called Royal Park has made great strides by selling flower bulb worldwide.
We are sending to the US, to Japan, to Canada, and to Europe, but we like to sell also to China.
Royal Park's revenue mostly comes from patent fees, as flower farmers are required to pay breeders for intellectual property in the Netherlands. Flower breeding is actually becoming a big business in many countries. Our gardening company in southwest China's Yunnan province has seen strong growth with new flower breeding.
We applied for a patent for our Chinese roses in 2002. Just last year, our revenue reached about 1 million yuan, and this is only the beginning.
Yang said he has developed 50 cultivars and widely distributed to Africa and Europe. He said there is huge market potential in the flower industry. That point was echoed by an expert from the International Association of Horticultural Producers.
Chinese flowers, even the wild flowers, they can all be cultivated. They can bring good returns.
Official data shows that there are 1,763 plant species were granted variety rights in China, and over 60% are flowers. The Kunming International Floral Auction Trading Center collected nearly 8.5 million yuan in patent fees in 2017. Song Yaotian, CGTN.
We'll be there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though. We'll be looking at Zambia and its snowballing fiscal crisis. Its fiscal deficit is forecast to be above 7.5% of GDP, and it's got barely 2 months' worth of foreign currency reserves. How does it get itself out of that fiscal hole? We'll have some details for you at 1800 GMT on Global Business. See you then. For now, though, back to Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports. Match officials begin preparations for the Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.